This is the Massa Minute Real Estate Podcast, where we break down the San Diego real estate market 1 minute at a time. This week, we have the pleasure of hosting Kendra Roy of Kendra Roy Designs to discuss building generational wealth through short-term rentals. Let's get started.
Hello everybody, Gary Massa here with Massa & Associates Real Estate Group, here with Kendra Roy from Kendra Roy Designs. Thank you so much for joining me today. Had Kendra come into the office where we were talking generational wealth and just wanted to jump on a quick video and just kind of share our stories. I think she's got a lot to offer in terms of that aspect. I love your story, how it's grown and transitioned. So let's just jump right into it. Tell me a little bit about how your career started. Again, you're a female in the construction industry and grew into design as well as owning and growing a rental portfolio as well with short-term rentals.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started many years ago in the construction industry, and it evolved into entitling and designing all my own projects and also with clients, and I just loved it so much. And then also, as we evolved in that, my husband and I started building a portfolio of our own assets so that, we could have, essentially passive income and something to retire on later in life, and also pass down to our now son. And so what the great thing is because it's what I do for a living, I would build and rehab and design all of our projects.
Right.
And so it's been really fun to be able to, kind of have that on the side and grow that business as well. So.
Well, I mean, again, look, we all work really hard, right,
Yes.
in our trades. We don't want to keep working forever. We have to have something to, fall back on a little bit to provide some passive income so we don't grind it all the time and we can start to enjoy life at some time. So what inspired you into the construction field in the very beginning?
It was kind of by chance. I was in college still, actually, at USD, and I started working at an internship for a company actually in La Jolla who did real estate development and construction, and I just immediately dove right in, and I fell in love with the whole aspect of real estate, right? But more specifically, the construction, which is, taking something that's essentially ugly and, doesn't work for where it is or what it is and changing it, right? And then that's kind of how I evolved in really doing a lot of the design, because you need to be able to do that, right? To know what you're doing. And I think the reason why I took on the design side was, as you're building in construction, you have the structural components of it, right? And needing to know how to actually build and do that, but then also making it so that it looks the best for the highest dollar. Right?
And works functionally within like the modern times,
Exactly.
like floor plan and that sort of thing. I've seen, San Diego has a lot of properties, especially downtown areas, 1940s and 1960s, 1970s, it doesn't really function for how we live today. Smaller hallways, like small, tight floor plans or not open. So I mean, okay. So in terms of development, we're not talking about you being a flipper. You're talking about developing like multi-units. Or tell me a little bit about what your niche was, or is rather, and maybe tell me what your favorite experience.
Yeah, I development-wise, it's anything from residential to multifamily. We just finished selling a multifamily lot that we were going to develop 7 units on, and again, I acquired the land and we bought the land and then essentially designed it and all that, and went to the entitlements, and I was going to design the interiors as well, which is really fun. It's nice to have your hand in all of it. One of the things that I think is a key takeaway with that is kind of what I call value engineering, right? And same with like our own projects, is knowing how to look at an asset and know how to get the most out of it, right? And also, don't overbuild. And, I always say is, you can do anything you want, but how much time and money do you have, right? And
it only costs money.
It only costs money.
And it's usually a ceiling.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so that was always what kind of drove me nuts with, sometimes with architects and working with interior designers, is that they would design these pretty things, but they weren't realistic to what the budget was or to what could actually be done, right? And so that's kind of why I decided to put on the different hats.
Right. Well, I mean, you're kind of unique in the sense that you're an artist as well as a scientist.
Yeah.
And usually people either have one brain or the other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're able to employ that into your full business.
Yeah, there's also a lot of room for mistakes though with doing that.
That's true, but that's how we grow, right?
That is how we grow.
That's true. Okay, so in terms of so that was your business, right? And now you've launched your interior design part of your company to be able to help. What was the reason behind that, or what?
I just loved it, and actually the reason I fell in love with doing that so much was that I got to really, as you say, artist is when I was doing our own projects. You have more of the ability to do what you want versus having to go to the client. So I was able to get very creative, right? And really just explore and see how things go together, right? And again, it was, with us, they're all Airbnbs, it was a different niche because I was trying to design to get that flair, to get someone's eye so that they'd want to book our place versus somebody else's place. And I think that's where I was like, I'm really good at this and I really want to hone in on it and give that ability and to help other people do that. And so that's kind of where it came from.
So it just kind of grew into that as well.
Yeah,
okay, and how long ago did you launch that business?
I launched that business actually this year, so it's been about, we're in July, so I just launched that side of the business officially.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that piece.
Thank you.
So you also mentioned the Airbnb piece, or let's just call it the short-term rental piece, right? And you did that for creating generational wealth, and it was fun for you and everything else. So tell me about that journey, how it started, maybe some of the hurdles that you encountered, and how you kind of corrected some of those to get them up and running at full performance.
Yeah, again, it was a lot of trial and error and a lot of just trying to figure out how to make it work. It's very challenging to have assets here in California now. And excuse me, luckily, my husband made a lot of smart moves early on in his career where he bought real estate very early on.
Here in San Diego?
In San Diego, when you could kind of touch it a little bit more easily. And a lot of the real estate we decided to either sell and then 1031 into something that we wanted. The way that we kind of look at our assets is we always buy something where it can be our home, right? A vacation rental, right? Where we want to go stay, but then also bring in the income to offset the mortgages and then, have a return on our asset, right? And we aim to have a certain IRR and perform, right? So, for example, we fell in love with a place up in Montana.
Okay.
And
where in Montana?
So we're on Flathead Lake. I don't know if you know where that is.
I'm not familiar with it, but
it's close to Glacier, Whitefish. It's a massive lake, and we went to the area, fell in love with it, and it was kind of our dream to be able to buy there. And luckily, the market was right here in San Diego, so we sold an apartment here, and for probably way more than it was worth.
Transitioned it.
Yeah, and we transitioned it, and so. It was very challenging building elsewhere when we thought it was going to be super easy. I do this for a living, and it was wild to build in Montana and see the costs that we were getting back, right? And the people that wouldn't show up. And so I literally sent my crews from San Diego up to Montana.
Really?
Oh yeah, I put them in Airbnbs and they stayed up there to finish our house because it was that crazy how hard it was to get help and at the cost.
Well, and was that because it was during the COVID time when people were working, or there was challenges just getting or there was booming up there too?
It was so we just finished that it's been 2 years now, so it was after COVID, and it was everyone I think has had so much work actually. It's just this crazy thing, right? The inflation of everything. Right. And what I've noticed with a lot of my crews, it's kind of pivoting right now, but there was so much work that they were just overbidding. And up in Montana, what's happening is actually so many people are moving there. So even touching the real estate there is very challenging, right?
Yeah.
And so you would have a guy come out and he would bid 4 times the amount of what the cost should be, right?
Because they had so much work going on. They just exactly.
It's pretty wild. So it has its challenges, but we that was the last one we just did. So
okay, and so you have 6. So where are they at?
So Mexico, Montana, and then here in San Diego.
Okay.
So.
And so you also kind of touched on a piece about being a landlord in California, and not to dwell too much on the politics of all of that, right? We could talk forever on that. But I think you touch on a point, like a lot of investors are really trying to make that decision right now. Like maybe they've had an investment property for a long time and maybe it's profitable, you know what I mean? Or maybe they bought something in like that 2020 to 2021 timeframe to do short-term rentals or whatever, and then laws changed, right? Tried to go longer term rentals. And again, we have challenges with that. And I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about, but being a landlord in California is really tough in terms of if you don't have the right tenants, it could really crush you. So a lot of people are making those decisions like, hey, what do I do with this? Do I sell it? Do I move it into a different state, a different asset, multifamily, whatever the case? So talk to me a little bit about that. I know you shared a story about, a challenging tenant that you had, but I mean, what was kind of the transition of that mindset from going, you had some long-term rental assets that transitioned into more short-term. So you recall like a specific time that you were like, it's time, and why was that? Walk me through that decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's very challenging here. So during COVID, specifically, we had a property in Golden Hill where there were tenants in the front house. And, as I'm sure a lot of landlords experience, they didn't have to pay rent. And it's understandable, but unfortunately the owner still had to pay the mortgage.
Right.
And so, that took place. And then after that, there was also laws where you couldn't touch them, right?
You couldn't even call them.
You couldn't even call them, couldn't do anything. And so, but then after that all went away, they still continued down that path. And so we couldn't even get them out, right? Because of, again, the way that it is here. And that was when we said, enough, right? Enough is enough. It's a better market to be doing Airbnb. One of the other things that we pivoted was because we noticed that long-term versus short-term, the quality of care of our assets are completely different. Like they get beat up when there's someone that stays there long term versus someone who comes in for a couple of days, housekeeper comes in, cleans up. But mostly it was the return on what we could get and how much more financially we could make by turning them into a short-term rental. Because we played around with it. We have a place in Mission Beach where in the summer we'd Airbnb and in the winter we'd rent it out. And we finally said, nope, we're done. We just did all Airbnb, and it's the best decision we ever made.
Okay. So, I mean, a lot of people, even other people who own short-term rentals, like myself, we know that, it takes a lot of work to do the turnover, right? The marketing to keep it full, and you're evaluating like, does 2 days, enough? Does it need to be 7? There's all these kind of factors that go into it. How do you feel about all of that? Did you find like a really good rhythm, or do you have kind of a formula that you follow to make sure that they're all profitable?
Yeah. So I manage all the assets with my husband, and it's been kind of trial and error to see what works and what doesn't work. So what we've done is we created essentially a company that is called Jets Holiday Homes, and it's a company it's my son's name. So
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. So it's my son's name, and so what we've done is we put them all, in that umbrella for our son, so that eventually they will be his assets, right? And we actually really try to explain to him now, even at a young age, what these assets are, right? And how important they are. But yes, we've got it down to a T now, and really the biggest component of it is your crew, your housekeeping crew, right? And really watching the market to see how it goes up and down. And, there's also technology, right? Which is, you can be your best friend with it. So we have all of our properties on a platform that kind of help manage and send auto responses. And the biggest thing is having like amazing customer service, right? And that's what we try to do, is give a 5-star hotel experience at all of our places. And then we watch how the rates go to try to make sure that we increase the rates, right? So next year we see how we performed this year. Next year we're going to increase it 20% or whatever to see how we can try to capture more income. So
now, so you're spread out in a few different states, but have you noticed any markets, like any market shift, whether better or worse, maybe in the last year or two? Like, I've talked to many different people who've owned short-term rentals here in San Diego, in the Mission Beach area. Some of them are performing really well. Some of them have performed less. You know what I mean? I don't know if you really looked into specific markets, because you mentioned you bought in places where you'd like to go and whatever.
Yeah.
But did you look into those markets and see the opportunity for growth and really evaluate those? The analytics of the markets? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, so we did notice, with Mission Beach, first of all, I mean, the whole permitting, taking away the short-term rental, was the lottery system. So a lot of people did lose their licenses, which is, again, just, it's really sad, right? I mean, it's so expensive to live here, and to be taking something like that away, I think is really unfortunate.
It's tough.
So we did notice, especially, this last year was at the beginning of the year was a little slower, and down in Mission Beach, and we think it was because a lot of people were traveling abroad.
Somewhere else, yeah.
Right? Because for so long they couldn't, and now it's kind of the aftermath of like, hey, let's actually go to Italy or whatever, right? And so we did see that for a little bit, but we're back to where we were and want to be as far as our occupancy rate.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we definitely needed to do a lot of market research with where we decided to purchase the assets for this, because if you buy in a place where nobody wants to go, right, and
or it has declined, right? Like, I'm not going to name any specific markets, but there's some that are drivable. You know what I mean? That people recently have been like, it's not doing as well as it was 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, that would be our place actually in Mexico. It's definitely not doing as well. I mean, there's been a lot of, there's a lot of people who are like, Mexico's scary, right? Yeah. And we don't see it that way. We actually see it that it's very safe. It's just like any place you travel, right? You need to travel smart, right?
Exactly.
But yes, we've
don't
definitely
go looking for things you shouldn't.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So we've definitely seen a decline in that. The value of the peso to the dollar and et cetera. Yeah. And so I don't know if you've experienced that in Cabo. I highly doubt it, because.
Well, no. I mean, to be honest, we've had the house in Lake Havasu for, I think it was 2022 that we bought it, right? 2021, 22. Anyways, right in that time frame. And our home in Mexico, in Cabo, was delivered at the same time. Our second home in Cabo was delivered at the same time. And so we basically got them both staged and ready to go and rented. And Cabo had just been performing like crazy. I mean, again, it's in a location that's a little quieter. It's not like down either one of the downtowns. It's right in the middle, so it's 15 minutes in either direction, which I like, a lot of other people like. But again, huge views. It's a very big condo, rooftop deck, etc. So there's a lot of draw to it, and that place rented like crazy. And then Havasu was a little slow to start. But what I've found was during that time, that was right when gas prices like jumped to like almost $7.
Interesting.
And so it's a drivable spot, because they do have an airport, but unless you have a private jet, you're not making it there.
Right, but everyone drives their boats there too,
and they drive
right?
their boats there, so it's a lot of gas to get there and back. And then run the boat for the weekend. That's you can spend $100 a day, or more, depending on what type of boat you have. So I think that gas piece really kind of crushed it for a little while. Plus, everybody jumped in. The market there jumped pretty quickly, right? So a lot of people bought second homes, vacation rentals, and so the market became saturated. Well, fast forward. I've seen a lot of those selling people just, the prices have come down a little bit. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people were selling. They weren't getting the rental aspects. It wasn't really covering as they thought. And plus we had those kind of market demand issues. Now, and again, I'm not sure exactly why for Mexico, and it could be the peso to dollar, or maybe people are staying a little bit more local. But again, like come April, we had it fully rented out in Mexico. It just stopped. Like the faucet turned off. We had maybe like 1 week each month since that's been rented. And so that's been a little challenging. Yeah. But before, when Havasu wasn't performing, Mexico or Cabo was actually covering it, right? So it all made sense. I treated them as like one, like a market fund or something like that. So like they all kind of helped pay off, work with each other. We also own some apartment buildings and things like that. So all the funds kind of got pooled, so it was like a performing asset as opposed to keeping them separate buckets, which I don't think is the right way to look at it, but at the time it made sense. And so that now Havasu is completely booked. It has been since the beginning of the year.
It's just such a roller coaster, right?
Yeah. And so is it because gas prices have come down, more people are traveling local? I mean, there's a lot of questions, but we've monitored that very quickly. We played around with the prices, really stayed on top of it. One thing that we did, we noticed an instant return, because Havasu people drive there, it's a drivable location, they stay. Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night, or just Friday and Saturday night. So by default, we were only renting the place 30%. It was only 30% occupied because the rest of the week was totally open. So I offered like buy 4 nights, get the 5th night free.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And so people then started coming Wednesday and leaving Monday, and like seemingly getting a better value. But I was getting 2 more days on average, per week, and then we were like 50% occupied, and now it's profitable, barely, but I mean it's paying for itself, right?
Yep.
Now where Mexico is way softer, unfortunately. So it's just interesting how things do change.
Yes. Yep.
And the unfortunate thing about Havasu, I evaluated the market. A lot of my friends had owned places there. They were getting a higher return, but it took a little bit of time. It was like correcting as I was evaluating it and making the purchase. And so that changed a little bit. Mexico I bought because I wanted to be there, but that market was also screaming upwards. But again, there's a huge supply influx. There's so much building going on that it kind of changes it. So I think point is you always have to be, evaluating the market, keeping your eye on it, and just you do have to be on top of it all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, you definitely do. I mean, it's, for example, we always also get worried here in California and also up in Montana with fires, right?
Right.
I mean, that's another attribute. I mean, there's so many attributing factors that can play into making sure that these assets perform the way they're supposed to perform, and things like that. I mean, it's, we even had, a friend, for example, who had a home. I mean, they can't even rent out in Napa, right?
Okay, yeah.
Because of the restrictions there. But like, they got rid of their home. They were doing long-term rentals, but they got rid of their home because their fire insurance went up so much, right? And so they had to figure out how to pivot and buy somewhere else so that it could be manageable, right? It can pencil out. And so there's just, I think it's definitely always paying attention to the different markets and how they will continue to perform for you. But Mexico has definitely, we love it down there, but it has been very challenging, I would say, for probably the last 6 months to 9 months, and so we'll see, kind of what we do there. I mean, the other issue that I'm very, very conscientious of is I don't like dropping our rate very low because of the quality of renter you're going to get, right? And, we put a lot of time, effort, and energy into these homes, and making sure that they're special experiences. And so, it kind of hurts when someone goes in there and they don't take care of it, right? But also there's expense behind it. And so I've noticed if I go a little too low, right, I also have to play with that game because, we want higher. We
want to keep it rented, but there's a certain line in the sand.
There is very much a certain line in the sand. So,
So what's next? Do you have your eye on another short-term investment, another market?
I'm actually from Colorado, and a lot of my family's there. I want to buy in Colorado, but again, it's very challenging right now.
It's a hot market too.
It is very hot, and specifically where I am from, which is a small town. It's called Fort Collins. It's most people know Boulder, but it's the quintessential opposite of that. There is no assets. There's no inventory. Right. So that's where my eye is currently right now. I'm trying to get there and find, really wanting to look to try to find like a fourplex or something like that, to see if I can get something like that to pencil in Colorado. Right. But we'll see. Right. How about you?
I love multifamily as well. I think my next, I was really looking at, and I know I just said I don't want to be an owner in California, but I was looking at something in Mission Beach that was it was 6 units, had a good, like a 3,000 square foot, essentially home, on the water, a two bedroom unit next to it, and 4, 1 units, right? Which you could kind of mix and match between long-term, short-term, etc. So I'm trying to pull some assets together to try to make that work, but ultimately, I realized that I couldn't use it as much as I wanted to with the way that I'm structuring it. So I think my next goal is I've been looking at Las Vegas and buying like 20 units at a time. Like I love multifamily for the whole aspect of like quantities of scale, essentially. And I've done quite a few, or worked with a partner of mine to do a few syndications, and I've loved that experience. And just for me, not having the vacancy, like you can have a few vacancies and it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Even when times get a little tougher, it's still a performing asset. And so I like that aspect of like buying something, again, not rebuilding it, but improving it, increasing the rents, and then selling it, after a few years. But ultimately, I'm trying to create long-term generational wealth for my kids as well.
Yeah.
And I feel like the returns are good there still. Prices are, for $2 million, $3 million, you can get 20, 30 units.
Wow.
And they pencil out pretty well, closer to 10% than here. Like a lot of the stuff that I underwrite in San Diego, it's like if you're getting 2 or 3%, even on like a long term, like that's normal. And for most people, they're like, that's not good.
Yeah.
I can keep my money in the bank.
Yeah.
So it's a hard sell.
Yeah. So, in Vegas, how is the market there right now? I mean, I don't actually even know, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they've had a lot of growth, and in terms of the growth of the city and the infrastructure, like they're building a new airport. I mean, obviously you have the college there, but like it just continues to kind of spread out. And like there's a part of Vegas that I've never knew about and even thought about, but there's multi-million-dollar neighborhoods, and those sort of country club type communities are growing, and the demand for that's growing as well. A set of clients of mine just sold their home here in Vista for like around 1.2 million. They bought it for like $300,000 back in 2008 or whatever the case. So they had a lot of equity in the home and decided that they were going to go and buy, a home in Vegas for their family, right? Move there. And with that, they were able to pay cash for that house and buy 3 different investment like condos, and so for them, where that probably wouldn't have been a possibility here, they've created a longer term, a shorter retirement, period, and then also, wealth for their family.
Absolutely.
So to me, like that excites me. I love helping people do that, and that kind of opened my eyes to that market a little bit more. But I love apartment buildings, not single family.
Yeah. If you can get your hands on it, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's just hearing you talk about that, it kind of makes, why it's so important to have the generational wealth for our kids, right? Because our generation is not really able to do as much as like the baby boomers, right? And the percentage of how much money they had or the assets they had for what they bought it for, right? To pass it on. And so, we were talking to one of our neighbors up in Montana. They bought their house that's right next to, by us, our closest neighbor, for $250,000, right? And we're sitting here like, oh my God, could you imagine, right? They have the ability to do that. And so it's just, it makes it really hard for anyone to be able to continue to do that, right? Unless you really know kind of how to play your cards right and protect your assets and to continue to kind of play around with them and continue to build a portfolio, because it's just more and more challenging.
Well, again, like I feel like every year since I've maybe not since I started real estate, but as I started like accumulating monies to where I can start investing, but every year making some sort of investment that I could, right? And a lot of people even trying to buy their first home, especially in this type of market environment, is really tough. It's what, $1.2 million in northern, North County, just for like, the median price point. So that makes it tough for people to buy. But when we hear these stories of, so-and-so bought for $250 or $300, at the time that was probably a very, could have been a tough price for them, or to get into. But over time you hold, and all of those investments over time have grown, or the homes that I've owned, excuse me, have grown, and then you take the equity out of that and continue to grow and grow and grow. And it's like, you can't just start at the multi-million-dollar apartment building. It doesn't happen that way. It's got to be a stepping stone process. There's got to be a lot of grit, invested. And then you create something for your kids, and ideally they listen to you and help grow it even further. But I think as parents, we all want to make our kids' lives easier than what ours were, and so that's been my why.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is definitely our why as well. Why we do it, right? Is to be able to give our son a better life than we had, right? We didn't come from anything, but we also don't necessarily want to spoon feed him either. We want him to understand what it takes, and to understand, it's hard work and perseverance and like you said, grit, right? And so it's funny. Our son's only 3, but really trying to have him understand, right? Just to give you an idea, like we at our Montana house, we pull water off the lake. And so this last winter, it was a negative 33 degree temperature that came in, right? And it completely shut our water down and cut the line. And no one would go out there, right? And so my husband went out and literally, in a suit, tried to fix our line. But our son sees that, right? Which is, Daddy's working hard to try to, continue to get this asset so that people can come stay here or we can stay here, right? It is not easy. And so, that's definitely another component of it, right? Is
Well, and when they see you working and they grow up in it, I think it helps inspire them to do, I mean, maybe, my kids don't want anything to do with real estate. They say that now. Maybe they'll change it. But I'm like, I don't care if you do real estate or whatever you do, just do something and have, watch me working hard, watch the process, and watch business building and get inspired in that way.
Yeah, well, and especially with what you're doing with the multifamily, I mean, that right there is, I mean, everybody wants to know how to do that, right? That's like the whole goal is to get to that point, especially if you're in real estate, right? Because you've obviously built the stepping stones to be able to get there to do that. So,
I mean, I remember when I first learned to do, or the reason why I learned to do, multifamily, I went to classes and seminars and tried to, get trained. But I remember being like, man, I would just love to own some apartment buildings, but like, where am I going to come up with $10 million? It just seems so far-fetched. But I really didn't need $10 million. You know what I mean? It just, you don't hit the home run every time, but you just get started, get involved, and then it starts to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, good for you.
Well, Kendra, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day. All right.